Forgot what day it was. Tuesday.
April 6th.
Monday. Oh.
Monday, April 6th at 7 p.m. Do we have anyone that would like to speak for public participation? Okay, if we have no one that wants to speak, is there anything else to discuss at this time? Oh. John, Mr. Howlett?
Keep in mind the purpose of this meeting was for the effectuation of a 1031 exchange. There's still various things that need to be done in regards to 1031 exchange. So just because that we're having this meeting does not necessarily mean that it will go through, but however, this meeting is set up for the public to come in and essentially comment or object in regards to the 1031 exchange. This does involve a parcel of property that the city of Lincoln is looking to exchange for another. That does involve the eventual installation of solar panels onto the parcel we're looking to exchange with. So I believe that this is in the best interest of the city of Lincoln that this goes forward. And if there's no other comment, I just wanted to make a comment myself, and essentially with some background knowledge in regards as to the reason, the why, and why it's good for the city of Lincoln.
They may not have heard me earlier, but is there any public participation or public comment? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. Do we need a roll call or just all in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Public hearing is adjourned at 7:02 p.m. All right, we will call this regular city council meeting to order on Monday, April 6, 2020 at 7:05 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bateman?
Present.
Mr. Leith?
Present. Mr. Welch,
Present.
Mr. Parrott,
Present.
Mr. Downs,
Present.
Mr. Keller,
Present.
Mr. Haneke.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, under public participation, Gabe, we're going to pull you up here. Gabe, it's all you.
Sorry, I can't hear you. There you go. Just kidding, Steph. I'm gonna present, presentation here. Can you see it?
Can you maximize it?
Can you see the screen?
Do you press the blue button to maximize it?
Is that a yes?
Oh, go ahead and click that one. Yes, we can, Gabe, it's Jeff Einaki, but it's small.
Appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. I'll turn my volume down, the speakers, for the feedback, and see if that's some help. If there is a problem, you need to get my attention, you might have to take your sticky note off so that you can get my attention. Over the past 2 or 3 years, I've been in communication with Steve Parrott, our liaison to the board, the city administrator, about a number of things that are taking place with the water system, keeping them updated on replacements that we'd be doing, upgrades and what have you. And tonight's just kind of a continuation of that, kind of some larger things that are going to be taking place that I want to present to the entire board. And hopefully we can scroll through this here. So was just a little introduction, look at the history of our wells, studies, some study options that we've been looking at, publications in the paper. Might remember we had a college out at our institute. We're exploring. We're going to look at the well-built summaries, and also kind of what our next steps are, study and presently. Of course, population is just about 17,200. Looks like we got an extra zero in there. We have 2 production facilities on our north wells there, and our south well field, we have 4 wells that serve the south plant. So we've had a number of studies. In the 1970s, we had a comprehensive source water study. Install well 12, which is currently our oldest well. In the 1980s, we had some work done to attempt to locate the Muhammad Aquifer just north of town. That study in the 80s, we added well 14, 16, and 18 to complement well 12 in the south well field. In the 2000s, we expanded our search for the Muhammad Aquifer, and these that we'll be talking about, we kind of acquired that property for future expansion or potential expansion. And then after that the study in the 2000s, we actually built a new plant at the north. And then currently starting in 2018, we have been looking further at our source water, our production production facilities, and kind of included the Lincoln College as part of that to try and spark interest in the water industry. So you've seen some of that in the paper as we've done that. So part of this 2018, so I looked at the Northeast well field here on the Muhammad Aquifer that we've acquired in the 2000s. Here's the north well field that I mentioned, and then our south well field. So our study that we looked at starting in 2018, there's two options. One was a new surface water plant adjacent to our reservoir. Option two was a new plant on the northeast of town. For several years of study and investigation, here's kind of the summary. The northeast well field on ample supply of water. Initial desktop study suggests we're able to get close to 5 million gallons a day. However, the treatment of the Muhammad Aquifer water was going to be an exotic treatment option, which would really drive up costs, not only today, but into the future. Would be a much more expensive treatment process. The South well field, also studied that a little bit more. We had some studies in the past that suggested that we would need to add 2 new wells, and we need to add those wells a significant distance away from our current well field. We did some more studying and actually have looked at a collector well, and after that study of that south well field, determined that we could accomplish the 5 million gallons a day that we could from the northeast well field, from the south well field, by use of a collector well. And presently that collector well is under construction and is progressing well. We'll kind of see how that lays out in our south well field here in a moment. And the great thing about the south well field is its traditional treatment. It's what we're doing now. There'll be no changes. We'll have iron manganese issues that we still address, the hardness. We'll be filtering the water, just a traditional option. So our south well field, we have the 4 wells. Well 12 is here, 14 is here, 18 is on this road, and well 16 is here, and the creek runs this direction along that. Lincoln Lakes is over on this direction from our well field. The collector well is going right in the middle of our current well field, and we'll be bringing in the water from the aquifer slower, and the benefit of that is we should see less fouling in the screens that we have. So the next step is the finished construction of the collector well. We're about 60% complete. The biggest thing that we have is to acquire land for the new plant, and we've identified a piece of land adjacent to our clear well that would be a great candidate for that. And then we also have to finalize our plant designs for the new surface water treatment plant, utilizing the south well field. So the potential land that we're looking at and is actually land owned by the city, and you can see it here highlighted. This funky shape down here at the bottom looks like an upside down flag. Is a piece of property that would work quite well for us. Issue is gaining access. We have had discussions with the fire department, with Streets and Alley, and others concerning access. We have discussions about that further, but through those conversations, it seems like it would not be an issue to be able to have access through this portion into this 3.5 acres of land that the new plant potentially go on. So the subject property that we're looking at, this is a flood map see that, it is out of the floodplain where our current plant is. And a lot of land around that is in the flood zone, and we would not be able to build in that area. This next picture just kind of gives a bird's eye view. Circled in red is our current well field down here and our current plant, and how close that is to the proposed water treatment site that is owned by the city. Any questions?
I don't think so. Mr. Howlett?
I believe the next step in this, if you're looking to essentially, if I could continue, I believe the next step in regards to this, if the city is, if the city does not have any objection as to the,
See if I can see you. Did you hear that presentation?
I did, yes.
Mr.
Gabe, can you hear us?
I think your mic is muted up there on the right-hand side of your screen, that gray box. Yeah.
All the way over?
Yeah, there you go. Try that.
Gabe, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Hear the presentation?
We did. No, we heard all of it. Yes. John, did you have a?
See the slides advance?
Yes,
Yes.
we had the separate presentation too.
Okay. It's slightly different design, but it's the same material, so we're fine.
Okay. Does any, Mr. Howlett?
yes, as I was mentioning, commenting earlier, not unlike the conveyance we did before, there would still need to, if the city of Lincoln is not opposed to a transaction of this accord, there still needs to be, they're still publishing requirements, and you still have to put it out for bid, so to speak. Okay, so that there are still there's still things that we need to adhere to in regards to a piece of property that we're looking to sell. So I believe I understand the presentation that's being made here, but the next step would be essentially to put it out for bid, if that's something that the city of Lincoln is looking to do, and we can go ahead and do that. But it would need to be published in the paper for 3 successive weeks.
Mr. Bateman?
Gabe, have you and Walt talked about the access road that was, I believe Walt was absent at that meeting? The road at the land waste facility, putting in a separate fence to give you 24-hour access to your plant, but then separating the waste facility plant. Has that been discussed between you and Walt?
It has, but I'll let Walt address that if you'd like to.
Okay, as long as there's control at the plant itself, I think that's fine. I think trying to bite the roadway is gonna cause issues and maintenance problems.
Kevin?
So then the control would be,
Further on that, we could have a control gate that the city and American Water could access at Broadwell Drive. And then American Water would have our own gate at the plant property.
okay.
Are there any other questions, or does everyone want to put it out for bid? Okay, we will put this out for bid then. Gabe, thank you very much.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I have
Nope.
a thing to add. What if was not a sale or a trade of property?
John, did you have something, Kevin?
If you're proposing a 1031 exchange, then there would be another piece of property that the city of Lincoln is looking to acquire of equal value. So if we're looking to do exchange of property, I have not been apprised of anything of that nature at this juncture, but
It could be a trade of property and improvements.
Tracy.
Walt, do you have specific pieces of property or improvements that you're talking about?
There could be several improvements at the facility itself. They do have some property at some point that they would need, I believe, from Gabe's discussions and myself, if that's, something that's possible.
I think we'll probably need more details on it, about what you're talking about. Anything's possible.
Kevin.
Yeah, we haven't finalized anything at all, just general discussion.
So then my suggestion is, instead of putting it out for bid between Walt and Gabe, they get together and work out the details of, and John, and for a trade. And if there can be, if the two entities can come to an agreement on equal value that appeases both, then we could move forward with a trade instead of selling the property to them.
I think actually, well, if I'm wrong, is us also doing some improvements to the property entrance in that area to make it conducive for the city to use that property in a more efficient way, since they're losing that 3.5 acres. Is that correct, Walt?
Yes, that's correct. The improvements at the front of the facility, and then also the property that's in question, there's gonna have to be some material moved around, things like that, and then there's some other work to be done.
So it would be a purchase plus an agreement to make some improvements,
John.
not a trade.
that essentially that would not be a 1031 exchange at that juncture. Essentially, we can make if we go out for bid and we choose the bid from the water company, then said contract provisions can also include terms of improvement of certain aspects of land that might be part of the purchase, and any easement, or if necessary, that might come thereafter. But that's subject to the contractual terms and would be identified in an ordinance that would come after the bidding process.
Okay, so we're going to go out for bid.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have anything else on this topic? All right, Gabe and Walt, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving down to the consent agenda, we have the payment of bills as well as the approval of minutes for February 3rd, 2020 special public meeting, February 3rd, 2020 regular city council meeting, February 25th, 2020 committee of the whole meeting, March 2nd, 2020 regular city council meeting, March 10th, 2020 committee of the whole meeting, and March 16th for the 2020 regular city council meeting.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion, Mr. Parrott seconded. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Moving down then to ordinance and resolution, we have the resolution temporarily suspending Lincoln City Code Rules and Regulations 1-6-4D and 1-6-8. Do we need John?
Just some background information in association with this. 1-6-4D, we have an ordinance in place within our city code that states that if somebody wants to participate remotely from the aldermen or alderwomen, that they must do so by vote at the beginning of the meeting. Given the fact there has been a designation of an emergency by the governor throughout the remainder of the emergency, this resolution essentially indicates that we would relieve that requirement so the individual aldermen or alderwomen can participate without having that vote call in the beginning of the meeting, and therefore can open up more of the council members to participate remotely. Furthermore, it also suspends 1-6-D, 1-6-8 in regards to the committee of the whole meetings. One of the stipulations in regards to the emergency designation and the suspension of the restaurants and whatnot in regards to March 16th, the governor put out and was then eventually extended, was that that municipalities and other, let's say, county boards limit meetings where possible. As I understand it, Logan County has suspended committee meetings at this juncture until the end of this emergency declaration. That's just as I understand it. Other municipalities have been following the same. We use the committee of the whole system, and this resolution essentially indicates that we'd be suspending committees of the whole in order to promote social distancing and essentially limit exposure of this potentially dangerous virus that's going around.
Do we have a motion and a second?
Move to approve. Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Welch seconded. Any further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Resolution authorizing Chief of Police Paul Adams to sign on behalf of the city various intergovernmental agreements, memorandums of understanding, and interagency agreements with the Illinois State Police.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Parrott made the motion. Mr. Keller was that made seconded. Chief, do you want to?
Step out of my IT role. Okay, so the Illinois State Police is looking to for a location for a crime scene investigator. They have a crime scene investigator for this region. It's currently stationed in the Bloomington area. Since we have a little bit of extra space in our new building, we have a desk that will work for them. And so we've talked it out. There won't be any charge necessarily because essentially we're going to be adding staff to our department by the use of crime scene services that are readily available to us. So they said if we need them for any type of local scene or anything like that, we can easily call them and they'll be right here and they can be Johnny on the spot instead of 2 hours away sometimes. So, and if we need anything processed locally, we can utilize that resource here. So it'd be like adding somebody to our department. And it's essentially for free. All we have to do is loan them a desk. So part of that was this agreement that I need to sign to be able to go forward with. And John was able to put together the resolution to allow me to make that signature on that document that the Illinois State Police has provided us. John has gone over the document and feels comfortable with it. So I believe we could move forward with it.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Resolution authorizing execution of a service agreement with the lowest responsible bidder for the supply of electricity for residential customers and small commercial retail customers who do not opt out of such a program.
Motion approved.
Second.
Trace made the motion. Jeff seconded. Discussion? Discussion? Do you want to say something about Tracy?
Sure, I'd be glad to. This is the residential aggregation for the city of Lincoln. We've done this before. This would be a 2-year term from June of 20 to June of 22. Peggy and I did get an email today from Mr. Chager that we will still be able to take advantage of the rate that's offered in the whole group that they have put together from Homefield Energy. That price will be 0.0424 kilowatt or per kilowatt hour, and that is a 12% drop from the previous price, the one that we're currently under. This is a reminder, it is an opt-out program. You're not required to do it. You'll automatically be enrolled, but you just opt out if you do not want to. If you do choose to opt out, then I believe it's a 1-year term that you cannot get back into the program. So we'd be voting on authorizing the mayor to sign the current rate, and we have the document to do so.
Questions or discussion? Oh, Peggy.
I have a question. Since this is a new contract with them, the people that opt out before, are they automatically opt out on this on this renewal, or are they in unless they opt out again?
They'll have to opt out again for the new term.
Further questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Under new business and communications, we have the approval of side letter agreement between the City of Lincoln and the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police regarding 2020 health insurance plan changes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ron made the motion and Tracy seconded. Discussion?
Unless Ron wanted to
Hey,
elaborate.
Ron, do you want to say anything about it? Or?
Oh, sure. So, of course, this is in response to the side letter, which was on our agenda a few months back, but we decided to vote it down because we were uncomfortable with language and point number 3, because it seemed to indicate that the $100 additional contribution would be perpetual even after 2020. So we went back to the Fraternal Order of Police in communication with Dave Nixon. I talked with him on several occasions. He understood where the city was at, why we were uncomfortable with the language, but he wanted some protection. So the language which we have there is updated. It has been approved by the union and is now up for us for approval.
Further questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Principal renewal for dental and life insurance coverage effective May 1st, 2020. Premium remains the same with no increase to premiums for fiscal year 2020 and 2021.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff made the motion. Tracy seconded. Peggy, you want to?
We received the increase, and it was going to be, where am I at? 5.3% increase should have been the dental and 13 for the life insurance. And then we got a email from R.W. Garrett's stating that principal put out a memo that during the coronavirus and everything going on, anybody with a May 1st through August 1st renewal will not have any increase. So it'll be exactly the same as what we were paying this past year for both those. Based on, if we add more people, of course, it'll be at more. But based on the current monthly premium that's in the agenda packet is what we pay now, and that's what we'll be paying after May 1st.
Kevin?
Because this is one of the benefits offered to the city clerk's office, I would be abstaining from this vote.
Discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Abstain.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Approval of welcome to Lincoln signs at the entrances to the city for option number 2 and foundation installation from Manley Monument Works with a cost not to exceed the amount of $15,340.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ron, was that you? Trace made the motion. Ron seconded. Walt, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. This is something that we've had budgeted for the last couple of years and just haven't been able to get completed. The signs look at the drawings, they're similar to what we have now, that we made of granite, so that the long-lasting and very less maintenance once they're placed, we'll have landscaping done around them to make them look very nice. This will cover 4 entryways into the city, and I think it's a great improvement in welcoming people to our town.
Any questions or discussion for Walt at all? Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. So, I love the signs, I love the concept, and I don't want to make them too busy, but is it possible we could sneak in 1853 somewhere in there, maybe underneath the name for and christened by Abraham Lincoln, so we could see when the town was christened? We don't need the full date, but maybe a year. I don't know, want to interrupt the symmetry of it, or detract from what's already there, but I didn't know if that would be possible to do or not.
Is there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Try it again. Oh, go now. Yeah.
Oh.
Say that again.
Okay, so love the signs, but is it possible we could put 1853 in there somewhere, the year it was founded, without interrupting the look of it or making it too busy?
We can try to come up with another drawing and trying to implement that into the sign for sure.
Yes, maybe thinking underneath at the very bottom, in the middle, at the very bottom, I don't know, it says named for and christened by Abraham Lincoln.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Beth, City Administrator.
Yes.
Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
There she is.
Oh,
I
we're
cannot hear
we're
you.
muted again.
I think that's a very good idea, and the picture of
Ron?
So follow-up question. So if I'm reading this right, the proposal from Manley was the least expensive. Am I correct, Walt?
Yes.
Okay. That would be for 13, and we're looking at the 13,840 with the addition of 375 for each sign for the foundation work.
That
Okay.
is correct.
So that would be total of, quick math.
I will mention this, that the sign, the beans signed to Lincoln head will show up on the Manley Monument sign. They just wasn't able to get that in the drawing. If that makes sense to anybody.
Can you say that again, Walt?
The beams, if you look at
Oh.
the other drawing,
Yep.
and then if you look at the city emblem that we have, there's beams behind the Lincoln head. Those will show up on the sign that Manley Monuments do.
Ron, did you have follow-up questions?
So the total 15,320, if I'm doing the math correctly. I'm a historian, so probably not, but
15,340.
That's for the signs and then the,
yes, and for
Foundation,
the foundation work.
If you look on the memo, if you look
Oh.
at the seed price, or actually the.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was on the agenda.
15.
Sorry, thank you.
Any other questions? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
City of Lincoln audit proposal from Estes Bridgewater and Ogden for fiscal years ending April 30th, 2020 and 2021 in the amount of $23,500 per year.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jeff made the motion, Tracy seconded. Discussion? Chuck, Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. You see the proposal there in front of you, 23,500. We've used the same firm for the last few years, for several years. Previous costs for, I think, two or three consecutive years, $22,000. So this is
modest increase, and when we get to the budget document, you'll see that it's included in there as well.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Haneke,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Leith.
Yes.
Approval of Crawford Murphy and Tilly invoice number 0208314 in the amount of $10,686.25 for the professional services from February 1st, 2020 to February 28th, 2020 regarding Lincoln Union Street Pump Station construction.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Bateman made the motion. Mr. Parrott seconded. Mr. Bateman, do you want to just say something about that?
There's probably going to be several of these coming since the project has started, so this is just part of that project. We'll have to approve these as they come along. So some of them don't have final figures yet until we know what work is completed, but this is part of the Union State, the mandated upgrade.
Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Haneke,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
Yes.
Mr. Leith,
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes.
Approval of invoice number 73 from Hanson Professional Services in the amount of $2,390.96 for Fish Street Road project.
Motion approved.
Can you hear me? This is Beth.
Second.
Tracy made the motion. Jeff seconded. Beth, do you want to comment on that?
I just wanted to say this is Julie. Design. She's making more progress as far as the design on farther. Probably we had a big echo going, so I kind of like that. Anyway, it's a test of what was going on with what we had also done with Crawford and Tilly. It's continuing on with.
Any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke,
Yes.
Mr. Bateman,
No.
Mr. Leith,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
Mr. Parrott,
Yes.
Mr. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Illinois Downstate Small Business Stabilization Program.
Motion approved.
Alderman.
Second.
Tracy made the motion. Ron seconded. Tracy, you want to discuss this?
Sure. This is the Small Business Downstate Business Stabilization Program. It's one of the programs that has been put out by the state of Illinois to provide financial assistance to small businesses. At some point, I'll turn it over to the administrator and let her elaborate, but this program, what's unique about it and what requires our attention is that this program can't be initiated by businesses. It has to be initiated by the city on behalf of businesses, and it can offer them up to a $25,000 grant if approved. And so what we'd like to do is just get the council approval to move forward with this so that the city administrator can work with the appropriate people to get our application submitted. And Beth, I would turn this over to you so that you could comment on the relationship with the city and the county to make this happen.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I spoke with County Board Chair Emily Davenport today, and she mentioned that, and I also emailed Chris Petty, who's in charge of the Greater Peoria Economic Development Council, and he has said, like what Alderman Welch had to go through a municipality or a government, not directly citizens, but it looks like that they were planning on having County Warden Chuck Rubin chair this, and so to work together, bringing back, but I told Chris City that would be up to the council how they wanted to do that. If they wanted to have me work on it, city, and together, I just sent this over, or whenever they come in, send information to the county.
Beth, you were breaking up a little bit, so I'll try to reiterate what you said. The GPEDC, which we're partners with, they have already established a relationship with Chuck Rubin through the county board because he sits on the GPEDC board. And what they've done in many other municipalities is have someone at the county level be a facilitator of these type of applications. And therefore, what Beth is talking about is, does the council want Beth to initiate the process, or does the council want Beth to work with Chuck Rubin and then provide him the information that we need to ensure that our application is submitted through the program? Personally, I think that Chuck is going to have that. He's already got that established relationship. He's going to be doing similar activities for all municipalities in the county. And I think it makes sense for us to leverage him as a resource through the GPEDC.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Did you lose everything?
He might be muted again. So,
Well, I was just going to say, while they're looking at that, I agree. I think it makes sense, and plus it might save some duplication of efforts rather than having him act and our city administrator act. They could do it in a dual partnership. So I would agree that's probably the way to go.
Tracy, you want to reiterate what you said so she can hear it?
can she hear us?
Yes, now.
So Beth, what I was sharing with the council and those watching online is that Chuck Rubin will be facilitating some of this for other municipalities within the county. And my recommendation is that we leverage him as a resource to work with you to get our application submitted for our small businesses so that we can take advantage of that program for those who need it. And so then my recommendation to the council is that we, by vote, approve the city administrator to work with Chuck Rubin with the Logan County Board to initiate this program, this Downstate Small Business Stabilization Program application.
I'll second that, if that's a motion.
It is.
Okay. Second, I'll second that.
Okay, Tracy made the motion, Jeff seconded. Oh, wait.
Yep,
Actually, I had
that's
a
correct.
motion second.
Already had that, right?
Yeah, we
You
already
had
had
it earlier. Okay.
Sorry.
Is there any further discussion? So then just to reiterate, if a small business wants, if a small business wants to reach out, then what you're saying is they would need to contact Beth
Correct.
in the city of Lincoln.
Just for this program. There are other programs available to them,
Right.
but for this particular program, we have to initiate it.
Okay. Beth, did you catch that?
We can share that with our
Yeah, we can.
applicant.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Okay, moving down to discussion on the budget. Chuck, Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. I think you've all received copies of a draft of the budget, which we had a committee this year for the first time in a while that worked on this budget. That consisted of Alderman Jeff Heineke, Alderman Kathy Horn, and City Administrator Beth Cavalman, who's trying to talk through our microphone there, and me.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Her
I
micro-
cannot hear you now.
your microphone must be muted.
It doesn't say it is.
That's okay, I can do sign language.
Can you just mute her microphone?
Tried. Okay.
As I was saying, we had a committee work on it, and as I just described, began working on this a few weeks ago. Normally, we would have had this at a committee of the whole meeting, which would have occurred last week. We had about 75% of it done at that point, and we would have discussed it at that meeting. We didn't have that meeting, and we're not going to have committee of the whole meetings. But the committee we had working on this did put together a budget based on the requests from the department heads and the elected officials. You've all received copies of it. I will say one thing about the revenue projections. As I previously had explained, it's going to be very difficult to make accurate revenue projections in view of the things that have happened with the COVID-19 virus. Many people think this is economy will bounce back after 3 or 4 months and it'll be stronger than it was before. I'm hoping that that's the case, but we can't say that with any absolute certainty. What we did, and I discussed this with the Municipal League and ran it by our city attorney as well, is I made projections based. Somebody on there?
Well, we can hear you.
Projections based. Okay. Projections based on the revenue trends that we saw year to date during the current fiscal year. And then I scaled them back somewhat, but I did not. We do, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chuck.
As I said, I scaled them back somewhat, but we don't know exactly how much we need to scale them back or if we need to scale them back. So what I intend to do is issue a memorandum that will attach to the final copy of this budget explaining that our projections are based on the best information we have to date, but they aren't necessarily, going to hold 2 or 3 or 4 months from now. And that if we are in a position where we do not meet those projections, we do have a fund balance that should enable us to get through that period. We have a fund balance of about $2.8 million in the general fund, which includes the money in the checking, and it includes the amount in the investments that I described in some detail a few weeks ago. Generally, we spend, that balance would be enough if we didn't receive any revenue for 4 months, 4.5 months. That would be a sufficient fund balance to get us through about 4.5 months. Ideally, it should be about 6 or more, and I would like to see us get to eventually to where we have a 12-month fund balance, which would be about perfect. There's really no justification for exceeding that or need to exceed that. We aren't anywhere close to that, but we're at about 4.5 months. If we do not make all these revenue projections, we will have a balance to continue for at least that long. I expect that when this is over, as I said, we'll see a rebound in the economy, and no one really knows for sure. This hasn't happened since 1918. And I've been looking for the minutes from those meetings. I haven't been able to find them, but no, seriously, I want, because I am curious about what they did back then. I'm sure budget was a lot smaller scale, but I think you can learn a lot of things from reading those things, and I intend to do that. Alderman Keller, I think you're the only other historian in here, but you've done the same thing, I know, with different things. And I think we can learn from it. But what we do know is we're going to see at least a temporary downturn in these revenues. You're not going to see sales tax come in consistently when everything's closed, or most everything's closed. I think we'll recover from that. So that the budget that you have here is based on that. The only thing I would say, a couple of things. One thing that I'd emphasize is if there's things in the budget that you plan to spend money on, not to spend them until we absolutely need them. Some things we have to have, like, for example, there's a dryer right now in the firehouse that's pretty well shot, and that's got to be replaced. There are other things like that too, but some of these things are things that we need to replace, but we don't have to do it right away, and I would recommend waiting on those things until we're more certain of the revenue projections. The other thing, we need some direction on how you want to proceed on this. Normally, we would have discussed this, as I said, in last week's committee of the whole meeting. We would probably have a budget workshop sometime about now, and then you'd have the next week's committee of the whole meeting, which we will not have, to discuss this. So as you know, have to approve this by the end of April. We have the public hearing scheduled for the time at 7 o'clock, immediately preceding the next regular meeting of the city council on April 20th. So we could, wrap it up by then, having met the requirements for publication, which have been done by then, and also the public hearing. But if you want to have a special meeting, we're going to have to do that sometime between now and the 20th of this month. And that leave it up to you at this point.
Jeff?
I'd just like to thank Treasurer Conzo, all the department heads, City Administrator Cavalman for putting all these figures together. It made fairly easy for the committee to go through. We cut some things, we really did. All the years that I've been up here anyway, this is going to be our first time that we've ever probably going to have multiple budget amendments that come through to us to try to adjust because of our revenue. Mr. Conzo touched on our reserves that we have for a rainy day, and this definitely is a rainy day that we're going through right now. So a big plus to the councils prior to all of us being up here for setting aside some money and not spending everything that we have. And now we do have some money set aside for this particular issue we have. Mr. Conzo also touched on, we have 4 months of reserves, but the way I look at that is that we'll still have some revenue of some sort coming in. So it's not like we don't have anything coming in for 4 months and we have to use all of our reserves up. We will have some revenue. But we went line by line and we went, cut this and added this, and I think all the department heads did a great job, and I think we should just move forward with it. And again, just have some amendments as the road we travel, we come across and see what happens. So,
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Hoinaki. And I did intend to talk more about that too, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. As you know, we all know we have appropriation ordinance, which sets the limits for spending in July. We can also pass, at that point, you can pass amended budget. You can do that several times throughout the year, as Alderman Hoinaki indicated. This is probably going to be a year when we're going to need to do that, barring some miracle. But we would have the capability of doing that even before that. But certainly at the time, the appropriation where you're going to set limits on how much we're going to spend, then you would want to, if it's necessary to reduce those below what we currently have in this budget, you'd want to pass an amended budget at that time as well, which would be consistent with the appropriation.
Questions or discussion? Kevin?
I'd like to just thank everybody for heeding the warning and tightening their belt where they needed to be. I go through the budget, and I even have a paper one here today. I know that's strange for me, but there's several departments that not only lowered their budgets, but they lowered them by double-digit percentages. Matter of fact, 4 of them are 10 plus lower than they were in previous years. Most of the rest of them stayed in the single-digit range. I want to commend Paul. The police budget is less than 1% than what it was previously. And Bob, in calling the alderman and asking for what he's wanting, and we all had discussions with him, he's kept his at around 6%. There is a couple departments that I do have some concern with that not only didn't cut any budget, they've increased by double digits. So I think those departments need to take another look and see if we can't rearrange the budget in such a way to try to bring those down to a more manageable growth based on the projections. And if things change, then we can amend later. But we need to start out looking at the revenue projections we have. And again, I just want to thank those departments who really took the time and went through their budgets line by line and made the necessary cuts. I worked on plenty of budgets at the county board, and finding departments that cut their budgets in double-digit percentages was few and far between. But I really have to commend the people that worked on this budget and got that part done.
Any other discussion on this right now? Tracy?
So are we going to take this to the next agenda as presented and then do an amendment at a later time? Or are we gonna try to squeeze in a workshop next week? I mean, how do you guys wanna do this? I don't know that we need to go through line by line in workshops like we have in the past, but at least provide an opportunity to talk about those ones that stand out more than the others. I think would be, especially since we have some new council members that are on the council. I think it's important we go through that process. So,
When do you want to do this?
Fine with that. Just make it another cow.
for next week.
Yeah, we have till the end of the month, I think, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Suspended, we just suspended the cows, but.
So you guys pick a date. I don't.
Are we doing next Tuesday?
That would,
Yeah.
yeah, when we do it anyway,
Right.
so.
Are we doing earlier?
So are we gonna do it prior to the cow, or just we just
There
gonna
won't
put it
be
on
a,
the?
yeah, there won't be a
Oh,
count.
right.
John,
Yeah, so
John,
let's just do that then.
we're just calling a special city council meeting.
Steve, what time can you be here by?
Budget
So we
workshop.
could, do you want to do 5:30? Is that too early for everybody?
Nope.
So 5:30 next Tuesday.
It's basically called a budget workshop
Yeah.
meeting
correct.
is what we're going to advertise we're having, correct?
Correct.
And the public hearing will still occur on the 20th prior to the voting meeting. And there'll be a notice in the pages of the Courier on the 8th, Wednesday, which lists the amount of the budget. Actually, the amount listed in that's a little bit higher than what we've actually come up with in this document. We trimmed it back since I sent that total into the Courier. So there'll be a notice in the Courier that the budget is available for inspection, and it'll be placed online by the city clerk on Wednesday. And then there'll be the public hearing. It has to be at least 10 days later. It'll be actually about 12 days later, so that your workshop meeting will be in between the time that's published and the time that you actually vote on it, and people will have opportunity to inspect it.
But this will still be just essential personnel.
That's
Next
I
week?
guess I ask direct that to our legal counsel.
John?
Through the end of the month.
Well, we've essentially suspended the in-person meeting requirement with the resolution that passed here earlier. So if any of the aldermen or alderwomen wanted to participate remotely, they can do as such without having council approval. And hopefully we'll have some more issues ironed out by the next time we do this. I understand this is our first time kind of doing this, so this is a bit of a trial run in regards to the system we're using right now. So hopefully those issues get ironed out, and we can more robustly, if the council members decide to, they can participate remotely, and only essential personnel should be at these meetings during this time. I would concur with that assessment.
So 5:30 p.m. next Tuesday, the 14th.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Do we have any announcements?
No, but I have another item to bring up.
Yep.
So, the mayor and I have talked. I know Chief Adams was on that email today, and city attorney was as well. As it stands right now, there's nothing in our code that grants the mayor authority to take any action without the council for emergency situations. Other communities have passed ordinances to at least temporarily empower their mayors to take necessary action, such as spending 4 items, passing executive orders, things of that nature. I don't want to get into the legalese. I think John has some opinions on that as well. But I do think that this is a good opportunity for this council to set some code in place, if not for us, for future councils, so that the mayor doesn't have to wait weeks to get things accomplished, because it ties his hands to do very simple things. So I think that's something that we need to make a priority. And if John wanted to elaborate on it, he certainly could. Sorry to put you on the spot.
There are certain provisions that the council could enact. As previously as I've noted, there are certain statutes that give the council authority to give the mayor emergency powers. That being 65 ILCS 5/11-1-6, along with the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act 20 ICLs 3305/11. These, not to drone out about this, but these do give the mayor certain authority if the council so wishes to vest them with that authority. However, there needs to be an ordinance passed that amends the city code that essentially puts some guidelines and stipulations in regards to that. Most notably, the council would have to consider what constitutes an emergency situation. Would a riot, would an act of God, would such essentially an emergency like an earthquake, a tornado, a situation to where we find ourselves now, where there's an alleged pandemic that's going around, and various other issues. Would those emergency powers include a curfew? Essentially, that would essentially keep people out after a certain period of time. What other powers that would go into that as well? For example, would you believe certain budgetary provisions in regards to the mayor and give him signing authority in regards to certain line items, or essentially abstain by those rules, so the mayor does not need certain council approval in order to get funding for certain items? Essentially order the suspension of all liquor sales, close down of all liquor stores, closing down of all bars, taverns, private clubs, suspend the sale of firearms, essentially make where only gasoline sales could be for motor vehicles only. These are all terms that could be all implemented in regards to emergency powers vested to a mayor. But it's just, what is the council comfortable with vesting towards the mayor? And furthermore, the statute I cited, firstly, it states that 65 ILCS 5/11-1-6 essentially means that these emergency provisions can only last until the next regular council meeting. So there is a statute of limitations, so to speak, in regards to how long this could last. But there probably should also be provisions within there if the mayor tries to abuse the system. For example, it lasts the next council meeting. Next council meeting comes up. Well, it's done. The council says, well, that's done. That's over. Mayor declares a new emergency situation for some sort of various reason. Now, that could also be curtailed by essentially limiting as to what constitutes an emergency situation. But those should probably be stringent and strictly construed, so to speak, not have any type of vagueness about that. So there's only certain situations where this can occur. But these are all questions for the council that should be at some point promulgated and discussed. And as Mr. Welch indicated, the mayor cannot declare any type of emergency situation, regardless of what the statute indicates, until the council vests the mayor with that type of authority. So if this situation were to get worse and the council not do anything, then we would essentially be caught with our hands, sitting on our hands. I will note that it seems to me that the municipalities that have declared emergency situations are home rule at this juncture, which have more discrepancy and have more leeway as to what they can or cannot do. Okay, and I will also note that some of the things that I mentioned previously have already been taken care of in regards to the governor's announcement and the county's announcement as well, Okay. So whereas this is probably something that probably should be considered at some juncture, maybe consider now. Okay. I will note that some of these will also essentially are being handled at this time already. Okay. Just food for thought for the council.
Steve?
John, so can you get examples of other cities or other cities, I guess, that would have these that we could look at then?
At the inception of this issue, the Illinois Municipal League has essentially sent out model ordinances that essentially would promulgate, if councils via home rule or not home rule wanted to institute various things within their city code. Like this, essentially, here's an example of what it would look like. I can essentially use that and adapt it to our own city code and put it forth before the council, and essentially state, now just because the Illinois Municipal League essentially has put something out saying that this is a model doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that the council must or should pass. If there are some terms that are untenable to the council, they could be removed. It's essentially as needed basis, but they've essentially at the beginning of this process, they essentially put forth sample ordinances and sample emergency declarations, not unlike what was done via the state in regards to on the county level. So there are resources that are available to us, and those are all on the website as well. And I can use that to essentially adapt it and see if it's something that whether or not the council will want to consider, and we can move on from there as to what would fit best for us if this is something that the council would like to even institute.
Thank you.
Anything further on that? Tracy?
So are there any objections with John doing that and then bringing that before the council as a starting point for discussion?
No, I think that's.
I think it's good. I think it's necessary.
Thank you.
Are there any announcements? Ron?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to update on the census. The census is still proceeding, even in the middle of a pandemic. There's a daily tracking that the Census Bureau has, recording anywhere in the nation where there's residents, and at this point, I saw this afternoon, there was 45% of the public had responded. We passed the April 1st day, which was supposed to be Census Day. 45% of the public has responded. Logan County is at 50%, so we're above the national average. So go Logan County.
Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Keller, when do I know they're doing the initial contacts online, when do the mail-in census forms go out, or is that staggered, or is that all at once? Do you know?
Well, they were actually, they were already sent out. Have you not received something, your residents?
No, I know. I just
Really?
received a postcard with a web address on it, but not an actual census form.
To my knowledge, they've already all been sent out. Okay. Well, I'll check into that.
Thank you.
Any other announcements? Ron?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to tag on to that because the postcard you received didn't have every residence has a identification code.
It did.
So so that's fine.
I did get that. But
Okay,
I
you did
didn't
get that.
the
All right.
actual form.
That's suitable. If it's suitable by you, then that is what the Census Bureau is doing. Is some people, I did actually get a letter, but I know some people have received something with a postcard. But as long as the identification number is tagged on there, that's your code to get in and do it online.
But aren't they supposed to send you a paper form too if you have?
Yes, yes. And if it's requested, they can certainly do that. But
Chuck, you can log on. It takes 2 minutes.
No.
2 minutes. Peggy had it done. You just log on and put your.
and that's why they have the identification number, so you can go online and fill it in. Yeah.
Are there any other announcements? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Welch made the motion. Mr. Keller seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 8:15.
You should be the one in the picture.
Certain amount of days. First, we're gonna send you another one. So they might send
That's
you.
what I got too, but I didn't get
I actually got the paper when I filled it out, and